Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We don't care when you're listening. We're just happy that you are. John Buzby here along with Marty Sheehan, and we are thrilled to be with you as we get set for week 0, when there will be the first game played of the new 2022 football season. Got a couple house cleaning items to take care of. We got an exciting announcement for you, and then we'll get to the week 0 games and go through them one by one. I want to start by clarifying something that I said on the last podcast, when we were referring to and kind of going back over the referee situation. And I mentioned that Mr. Lamar Gunn had stated during the DIAA meeting that no African-American had ever been a head referee. And he reached out to me and clarified that he, in fact, did say that a friend of his, Jeff Fleming, was a head referee in a state title game who was also an African-American. So I want to apologize to Lamar Gunn for misquoting him. And then, of course, we have found out since that there has been at least one additional African-American who has played in a state title game. Also want to clarify that when Mr. Lamar Gunn was talking about the rating system and questioning it, he was questioning the downstate rating system. And I believe I said that clearly in the last podcast, but just wanted to make sure of that. And we, again, have confirmed with Bob Collins, the president of the NDFOA, that there is, in fact, a rating system upstate. All right, so let's move on, Marty. We're rebranding the podcast. And that's the exciting news. And it's funny, we talked and we were both thinking along the same lines without telling each other. And, you know, we've said when we started this almost 2.5 years ago, and we started the course in January of 2020, when COVID was at its peak. And that was really the basis of the podcast, not why we started it, but the conversations week after week became basically centered around COVID, masks or not. Cancellations or not, parents in the gym or not. And then after that, of course, summertime came and then football season started. And what we realized real quickly over the next year is that our niche is football. And that is what we enjoy doing. We would enjoy all sports, but we really enjoyed football. And we found when we tried to continue to broadcast after our first football season and the listenership went down, that there isn't the interest in the other sports that there is for football. And when you think about it, that's the reality at the professional level. It's the reality at the NCAA level. And that is why ESPN carries more football games than any other college sport. And so we've decided that we are going to stick with our niche, which is football. And we will become the only podcast, and if you want to call it a show, radio show, it's not a radio show, but on the airwaves show, the only one that's exclusively dedicated to Delaware High School football. And so that's going to be our name. It's going to be the Delaware High School Football Podcast. And we're going to emphasize the, like they do for the Ohio State, because we are the only exclusive Delaware High School Football Podcast. There are other people that do a good job covering Delaware High School football, but they also cover other things. And that's fine. We have chosen and will continue to do just Delaware High School football. So we will come on the air with our podcast the first week of preseason, whenever that is, like we did this year. And then we will carry through to the day after the state championship games, when we will talk about them and what we think about the following year. And it'll come to about a total of 20 episodes during that time. And then we will, if there's a reason for us to have a podcast during the year about Delaware High School football, we certainly will. And because we enjoy talking about Delaware High School football, and we have the capability to hop off and on throughout the spring if we want to. Zoom and us broadcasting from our homes allows us to do that. So now with this rebrand, we will have a new Twitter handle, and it will be DELHS football. DELHS, easy to remember because that's the Twitter handle or the hashtag that everybody follows for Delaware High School sports. And we want them to continue to do that. If you're interested in Delaware High School football, the hashtag is DELHS. We decided that we're going to take advantage of that popularity and just add the word football to it, and that will become our Twitter account. So you can remember that easily, DELHS football. And so if you want to reach out to us on Twitter, if you want to tag us on something, you can tag us on DELHS football, and we will certainly get back to you. There will be a new Facebook account. We will continue to keep both Facebook accounts, the old one, Delaware Sports Debate, DE Sports Debate, and the new one yet to be determined. And so we will make that announcement as well. The good news is, as far as you getting our podcast, you don't have to do anything. because the same podcast will be delivered to your phone, and we will continue to send out the link to the podcast. The only thing that's going to change is the look of it when it pops up in your phone, because there will be a new logo. We have our graphics person working on our logo. We have our audio person working on a new intro and outro, and that will all be kicked off next week. We decided, we mulled this over, Marty, back and forth at the text, and part of me wanted you to talk me out of it and think that, let's wait another year. And then we decided, why wait another year? Because we're going to make this move. Let's rebrand ourselves. Let's set us apart from everybody else in terms of what it is exactly we do, which is Delaware High School Football. So I'm excited for it, and I think you are too.
I am. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is we always talked about, we kind of want to be the destination spot for people that wanted to listen to talk about Delaware high school football. And we thought, the season hasn't kicked off yet. It kicks off on Thursday. And we just thought, hey, why not announce it now? Have the rebrand ready to go when we start talking about the first week of the season, the results of the first week. So no, I'm excited about it.
And with that in mind, if you are interested in being a sponsor or advertiser for the show, certainly reach out to us at any of our social media platforms, Facebook or Twitter, or you can also email us. You can email me directly at johnbuzby@hotmail.com. That's JON for John. If you are interested, we have packages put together for the small businesses, the small sole proprietors who are here in Delaware who want to reach a broad audience. And that's one thing that is unique to us. We have players that listen, coaches, parents, athletic directors, school administrators, families, grandparents we've heard from who love to hear their nephew, or their grandson's name called out, that type of thing. So if you are interested, reach out to us. We think we have a very price-friendly package for smaller businesses and sole proprietorships. And one of them is Andre L. Photography, friend of ours, friend of the shows, spent a lot of time with him on the sidelines when he was a photojournalist for the News Journal. And he's now gone into his own business. And you can reach him at andrelphotography.com. Great guy. Whether you want to, if you're in charge of your league or organization's pictures this year, you can go ahead and call him, reach out to him, and he will come out and do those for you, do these individual portraits as well. But he really also specializes on game action. And he comes out to the game that your child is in, takes pictures of them, and then you have a forever keepsake. And when you go to his website, you'll be able to see some of his work. He does just an outstanding job. Some people have reached out to him to do senior portraits instead of the traditional senior picture in the tuxedo that you only wear once a year. He has done it for kids in their uniforms and stuff like that. So again, it's andrelphotography.com. Great guy, great photographer. Do yourself a favor, reach out to him and create the memories that are soon going to end. Marty and I have seen it happen. We've had kids who have played sports and no longer are. I'm fortunate enough to still have two kids playing. But eventually I know that will come to an end as well. And I know I plan to reach out to Andre to get him to come out and work with my children as well and get some pictures. So again, andrelphotography.com. All right, Marty, let's move to week 0. We're going to run through the games, talk about them, give our feelings about them, and then pick the game that we think that we should be going to if we were going to only go to one game. All right, so it kicks off Thursday at 4:00. Caesar Rodney at Hodson. Riders come in 0-11 from last year. Hodson 2-9. Frank Moffitt Jr. retiring this year, so it is his last home opener. It's also the last home opener at the stadium where it currently exists, because they're doing a complete redo of that complex at Hodson, and the new football stadium is going to be where the old school is, because they're moving the old school to where the current football stadium is. So next season, Hodson will be displaced, playing other places. They're not sure yet where that's going to be. Fortunately, there's enough places in and around the area where they are. Caravel's a mile away. Perfect place if they choose to do that. And so they will be playing somewhere, but it's kind of an exciting game for that reason. Both these teams had a turnout as big as they've had in recent years. Caesar Rodney had 140.
That's crazy.
Come out to the program, which is crazy big. And they graduated 23 seniors, so they needed to have that kind of turnout. Hodson, I talked to their coaches. They've got several sophomore and junior starters this year. They struggled last year. They knew they would because of the youth. They had a lot of freshmen involved on the varsity team, a lot of sophomores, not so many seniors and juniors. This year, that is going to change. Marty, both these teams made the playoffs last year because everybody made the playoffs. This year in Class 3, only 8 teams are making it. You think either one of these teams are going to get in this year?
I think if either of these teams has a chance, it's most likely going to be Hodgson. And remember, for Class 3 this year, unlike the other districts, it's the top three in each district, and there's two at-large spots which go to the highest point index. That's where these teams would figure in, because I don't think either of these teams is going to be sniffing the top three in either district. For this game, whoever wins this game has a shot. Whoever loses does not. These the teams are very young. As you said, CR graduated 23 seniors. Hodgson has a couple guys, wide receiver Davis, and some young defenders that are coming back. CR, the Dan Candelora read an article, I think it was in Beta Bay News, and he is extremely excited. I mean, again, that turnout just blew my mind. More than 140 players. So they can field, a varsity, a JV, a freshman, a couple freshman teams if they wanted to. That's amazing. I mean, the excitement down there for football, and it always in Lower Delaware, there always has been a ton of excitement centered around these programs. And I said it last week, CR, when they're competitive, when Cape is competitive, football overall in the state is just better. So I do think CR is going to make some moves. I don't think it's going to happen this year. Looking at the schedule, boy, it's tough to find a win on there. I hope they do get one. They're on an, I think it was 11-game losing streak now. They 0-11 last year, counting the playoff loss. But I feel like the future is bright there. But for this year, Hodgson's just going to be a stronger team. As you said, they had some young guys who got some great experience, taking some hard knocks last year. Hodgson won this game 20-7, which was the score at halftime. And neither team was able to do anything. Hodgson kind of just tried to control the ball. Cape had some turnovers. So tough go for Cape. And I kind of see, for Cesar Rodney, I kind of see the same thing happening here. So I think Hodgson's going to take this one. And I think they're going to be a team that possibly is in the mix for that at one of those at-large spots at the end of the season.
The game is at Hodgson. It's at 4:00, which makes it difficult for the CR crowd to come up and watch that game. The football team will be leaving school early for sure. Cesar Rodney, the players have been back in school as long as any other team in the state. And where you get a disadvantage there is double sessions end when school starts. Now, the Hodgson players are going back to school this week as well, or actually they went back last week. And so there's no real advantage in that case. CR might have, or Hodgson might have had a couple double sessions extra, but it's not a huge advantage as it might be for a team we'll talk about in a little bit here. Cesar Rodney, Dan Candelora, I talked to him directly. He loves his freshman class this year. He loved his freshman class last year. And so he's excited about the excitement around the football program. And that's clear when you have 140 people that come out for the team. Hodgson is excited to see the young guys step up and transition from last year. I talked to offensive coordinator Dave Collins this morning, actually, and that was what he said when I asked him, what are you most excited about? And they are excited to see that happen. And so it's a great thing for Hodgson to be hosting that game. And I kind of agree with you. For week 2, CR hosts St. George's. That's going to be a very tough game for them to win. Hodgson hosts Dover. That's going to be a tough game for them to win. But I like Hodgson's chances much better against Dover if this young team of theirs comes out and is able to pull off a win against Cesar Rodney. The ability of the other team doesn't matter in game 1. I mean, it matters obviously, but it's a big difference being 1-0 and 0-1. That's what one of these teams is going to be. So,
do we know why this game's at 4? Just out of curiosity.
Well, they don't have lights, so it's got to be done by 7:30ish. And so my guess is that is the case.
Just surprised this wasn't a Saturday afternoon game, which is usually, or morning, which
it's Labor
Hodgson
Day,
does.
Labor Day
just from
week.
a fan standpoint.
Yeah. No, I think they probably wanted to try to avoid Labor Day weekend would be my guess.
Oh, okay.
If they're able to, that's
right.
That would make sense to me.
Yep.
I don't know that for a fact.
But you're right. For CR, that's a tough go at a 4:00 start up at Hodgson. So it'd be interesting to see how they adjust coming right out of the gate.
Yeah. One game that we were going to talk about, but we're really not going to talk much about in terms of the game itself, was the St. Mark's AI game. And that's because, as news has come out to some people apparently and some people not, AI has decided to drop down to a JV only schedule. Before we went right on the air, I looked at their schedule. Nothing has changed. I'm not sure if their JV team is going to play St. Mark's JV team, which would make sense. And whether that will be in the place of the varsity game, same time, same place. everybody's waiting to hear from that. Marty, you've been on top of this from the beginning, as much as hearing some rumblings before this became an issue that it was going to be an issue. So I'm going to turn it over to you and let you talk about what you knew and what your thoughts on or what's going to happen here in this situation. The bottom line is it's a shame that AI,
It is.
which when I first got in this business, probably close to 15 years ago, as a writer for the New York Post, I went to cover a game there, and they were 10-0 hosting St. Mark's for the first round of the playoffs. They ended up losing, but they were the team to beat as little as about a decade ago. And here they are now not having a varsity season. And again, you all know AI DuPont used to be the premier school above the canal, the premier public school above the canal. And that has changed as well, mainly because of charter schools and other private school choices, et cetera. But this football thing is a shame because you've got a handful of seniors now who thankfully are still going to play football, just not at the varsity level.
Right. And to point out something you said last week, this was also AI had the biggest band in the state at one time, and they were performing in Rose Bowl parades. I mean, this was, and the school, the attendance has dropped, the enrollment. So yeah, it's been a sad situation, but it's interesting. AI has not made an official announcement about this, but I heard from two St. Mark's parents who said that the team was told that the game was not going to be happening on Friday night. So they were told that AI was moving to a JV only schedule. Now, a few months ago, maybe 3-4 months ago, AI sent a letter to the DIAA. I sent you a copy of the letter, John, and in it, basically, they make the case that they can no longer safely compete at the 2A level. Last year, they started the season with around 30 kids. By the time the season ended, and after some serious injuries were suffered, specifically during a game against Tower Hill, they got down to 13 players, so they were forced to call off the season. You and I sent you a note about the parents. There's some parents on Facebook who were like, well, these kids are wussies, throw them out there and it'll build character.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're in wheelchairs when they're in their 30s.
Right. Yeah.
Or this is just
ninth
not
graders at 130 pounds trying to block.
That's the problem. Yeah.
Defensive line and protect their quarterback.
So, exactly. And you've got at the 2A level, we've got some real stud kids. They're big kids at this level. So this was really never a tenable situation. And I hope there's an official announcement coming soon. It seems the safest way and the best way to do it. It is a shame for the seniors. Now, we heard from someone, and I looked it up. I did not see anything in the DIA handbook that would preclude seniors from playing JV ball. And I can't imagine if you're a team like anybody on their schedule, frankly, that playing a team like AI with some seniors on it is really going to hurt you. Most of these teams are sophomores and juniors at the JV level. Some of them are kids who suit up for the varsity team, as you know, and they may not play or play a quarter or two, and they're allowed to play, I believe, 2 more quarters for the JV team. Mm-hmm. So hopefully something is worked out where AI can play some type of football. Their new coach, Marcus Heyman, I know they're excited to have him. I know the kids who are there are very excited to have him as their coach. There's just not enough of them. So this is something, I don't know that this is ever going to get better at AI. Their enrollment has declined precipitously over the years. So it's sad to see a program like that down like this, but hopefully, and again, this is what we've heard. I've read the letter from that was sent to DIA. I've heard from the parents who said this is happening. So if this changes, of course, we'll talk about it on the next podcast, but from everything we know, AI will not be playing a varsity schedule this season.
Yeah, and I agree with you. Looking at the District 2 teams that they'll be guaranteed to play, at least, half those teams, probably their JV team probably beats AI as it is right now, even with the seniors. And the other half should be good games. And so I don't think anybody would be against that happening. Somebody also brought up, should the seniors be allowed to transfer? I would imagine they are allowed to transfer. I don't have the specific rules, and sometimes these transfer rules aren't as, they're as clear as mud with the DIAA anyway. The problem is, as we do know, if somebody transfers, they have to apply for it. And that's not the quickest process. The season could be a solid 2 to 3 weeks in before a DIAA board meeting would meet, unless they did it, as a favor and an emergency for these kids. The good thing is they would have the minimum number of practices in because they did practice. It's not like they're transferring to a school to play a sport they hadn't started yet. So I assume those practices with AI would count. And so they wouldn't have to do I think the required 6 or 7 practices
Right.
before that. So I'm not sure whether that's going to happen or not. The bottom line is, I think these kids realize, the seniors probably realize, yes, it is a shame, but they love to play football. And the best way for them to have a fun football season is to play against a JV team. Let's face it, that's why they came up with 3 classes from 2 divisions, because they wanted that, what is now Class 1, to have fun playing football, so that they would have a chance. And some of the teams in Class 2 to have fun playing football, because you got a somewhat legitimate shot to win every game. And that's what AI has done. So I applaud them on the decision. An easier decision might have been to just cancel football altogether and save a bunch of money not playing a JV schedule. But the administration didn't do that. So hats off to the administration there for, and of course the head coach, for Coach Heyman, for making what I think was probably the only decision that made sense, that's in the best interest of the players that will still suit up this season.
Right.
All right, let's move on to the next game, the third of what would have been 6 games at week 0. This is another Thursday game. It's Cape at Sally's up at Apocinio Stadium. I believe kickoff for this is at 7:00. Cape brings in a new head coach, Mike Frederick, defensive lineman for the Ravens. Brought in a passing coach. Obviously, his specialty probably is defense. So he brought in a passing coach. You'll recognize this name, Kevin Smith. He used to be the Polytech head coach a few years ago. And Bill DiNardo, of course, for Sally's. Cape did pick up a win last year against Caesar Rodney. As you mentioned, Marty, Sally's went 8-3, losing in the playoffs. Cape is 11-36 since 2016. Bill Collick coached during that time. Also, J.D. Mall coached during that time. And Marty, this is always odd to me. Cape is good in just about everything else. And football, they've struggled with. And ever since you and I have started covering them, and it's odd, because I always say the reason is Cape is good in all those other sports is because they don't lose the kids to any other school down there for the most part. There's not a football powerhouse within half an hour of that school. You could argue Sussex Central, but I don't think Cape loses good football players to Sussex Central. Sure, there may have been 1 or 2 over those years, but they stay in Cape. They stay in the district and they play football for their home school, much like I did when I grew up in South Jersey. You didn't have all these other choices, and yet they've still struggled. Do you think Mike Frederick has a shot to turn this thing around?
I think if anybody does, he does. And again, they bring in Kevin Smith, the coordinator. Cape was a weird team last season. They had a number of games, and the game against Sally's was one of them, where Sal's led 28-6 at the half, and Cape just dominated the second half. They pulled it within 28-20 with about 8 minutes left, just weren't able to finish it off. I believe had a turnover at the end that killed them, sealed the deal. But they had a few games like that where they were in it for a while, and I know one of the definitions has been, or one of the mottos has been, to finish this season. But everything I've heard from down there is that numbers are still good, that they're bringing in a good number of kids. And it used to be, I remember when I was in high school, the joke used to always be that they grown big down south. I mean, because Cape Henlope and Caesar Rodney, those teams are huge in terms of size, not the roster size, but the size of the kids. So I don't know if that's the case anymore. It would appear not. They do have some good returners coming back. Sal's lost a ton of production on both sides of the ball, but that's like saying, well, the New England Patriots lost one more game than they lost last year. I mean, it's like, the machine keeps on rolling. Sal's draws in so many kids from so many different places. So, they return Nate Ray. They return 2 huge special teamers, punter Aiden Montgomery, kicker James Collins, who's got some things on Twitter with some really nice kicks. Cape returns Thomas Messick, which was probably their star player last year. He was first team all district cornerback, second team all district wide receiver. Mike Frederick is going to have the pieces to work with. It's just a question of that there's a lot of young talent on this team. I don't know that they're going to be able to make a mark. I kind of see them making a little bit more strides maybe than CR this year, because there's always seems to be some excitement always generated with a new coaching staff. We saw that with Dover with Chip Knapp last year. And I think Mike Frederick, it's interesting. He said, I saw the article where he said, the kids really don't care about my NFL career. It doesn't really come up that much. And, I'm thinking if I'm on that team, man, I'm asking him everything.
Yeah.
I guess when those kids weren't even born when he's playing in the NFL, maybe it makes a big difference. So I'd like Sally's in this one. they're going to be one of the top teams in the district, if not one of the top three, which most likely they'll be right in that mix. They'll be certainly in the point index mix for one of those 2 at-large spots. I think Cape they're going to make some strides this year, but it's not going to happen in this game. I think Sally's, they have that new passing offense. They did lose their quarterback, Connor Campbell, who was phenomenal last year. I don't know who the starter is going to be this year. I saw a rumor of a transfer quarterback that came in, but I haven't heard any more than that. So I still think Sally's takes this, and Sally's goes into a good season. Cape hopefully makes a little improvement over last year.
Yeah, I met Coach Mike Frederick yesterday. I was down for my son's soccer play day at Cape, and he was walking up, and I had seen him. I went to the Cape Hodson scrimmage last week, and he's kind of got that Nick Saban straw hat that he wears, and he's a solid whatever he is. I looked up to him when I met him, so he's a figure on that campus, and I don't think it can be underestimated the impact that a coach has when he comes from playing in the NFL, or if an NBA coach came and coached at your school. I don't care whether the kids are in all of him or not. Don't tell me that they're not.
No, there's some cachet there. Yeah.
And so when he speaks, they're listening because he's done things that most of them are not going to do, that none of them are going to do, maybe other than Keyshawn Mansfield, who he pointed out during one of his interviews has already gotten an offer from Dell State. Not the NFL, but it's still playing at the next level. And so I just don't think you can underestimate the power that somebody with NFL experience has coming in there. And the other tie that he has, that last name Frederick, a lot of people know his uncle Dave Frederick, who's the columnist for the Cape Gazette, has been around forever. Yep. He's got a camera around his shoulder every game that goes on there, any sports. And the lineage of Fredericks that he's related to down there have all been wrestling champions, field hockey champions, lacrosse champions. And so the Frederick name lives large down there to begin with. And then when you bring somebody in, he's from Pennsylvania, actually, bring somebody in who has played in the NFL, it just means a world of difference. And so I think Sally's is going to win. What I'm looking for Cape is how do the kids play? I'd like it better if they were at home, which they're not. They're going to get in the bus and travel 2 hours up to Abyssinia Stadium. And again, Cape is not back in school yet. These kids are not back in school. The Sally's kids are. Not sure how much of it. I don't think that's going to impact this game at all. But I expect Sally's to win. I think what I'm going to be looking for from Cape is how the kids react to playing. It's almost like a David and Goliath game, without a ton of meeting because it's week 0 meeting, but it's still a big game, and I'll be interested to see how this new coach with NFL experience has his kids ready to play. I heard the kids talking about the players that it's an excellent practice mood. The people's temperaments as far as their excitement are way higher than they've been in recent years, the kids who have been around this program for a couple of years, and all the players are excited to be there. And I think part of that comes with having a former NFL player as your head coach. And so
I agree. It's baptism by fire too, because Abyssinia is going to be rocking that Friday night with Sally's back in school. They're going to have the student body out there. So it's going to be an interesting environment for these young kids from Cape to walk into.
Yeah. I hope the Cape fans travel for this game.
I do too.
It's not, Thursday night, not an ideal place to go in the summer, but we'll see what happens. The second game for Cape, these guys both have tough games. Cape will host Woodbridge, so they'll drop down a class, but some would argue that, if there's a point spread on this game, Woodbridge might be favored. And then Sally's travels down south to play at Sussex Central. And so that's going to be a big game for them between two of probably the top 4 teams in Class 3 for that. All right, let's stay on Thursday night, the third of 3 games Thursday night. Defending champs Laurel at 11-2 last year. They're going to travel across the county, or up north, I should say, from where they are in Sussex County, to Sussex Tech, which finished at 6-5. Joey Jones coaches Laurel. Brad Ellingsworth coaches Sussex Tech. As I mentioned, they got their first state championship in 30 years last year. Just an exceptional season. Sussex Tech lost 14-0 to the class in the Class 2 first round game, and so they were thrilled to get into the playoffs. Weren't happy with their first round loss, but they're excited about this year. Marty, it's a Class 2 versus a Class 1. Which team has a bigger reason or a bigger need to win this game? You almost, despite the difference in class, I'm sure Laurel would be favored in Las Vegas.
Yep.
So is it a must win for them, or is it a game they can afford to lose and, not think that their season's over just because they lost to Sussex Tech?
I think it's the game they can absolutely afford to lose. This game shocked me last year. This was the opener last year for both teams as well, and I kind of marked this as one of the games to watch. And Laurel just blew Sussex Tech off the field 41-8. And that kind of set the tone for the season for Laurel as they just went on to mow down everyone in that class, including St. Elizabeth's in the finals by 14. For Sussex Tech, I think this is a huge game for them. More than anything, from a confidence standpoint, let's face it, Laurel probably can compete or would compete for a spot in the division or the Class 2 playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
So I think for Sussex Tech, it's a great opportunity to make a mark to get before you enter district play, which is all that matters at that level, to take some confidence from this game. Even if they were to play close with Laurel, I think it would be a big deal. Laurel returns a lot, though. They've got their quarterback, Caden Shockley, who was great last year, wide receiver Brady Lee. They have some key offensive linemen coming back. They have the first-team all-district kicker, which came into play a couple times, Mike Gonzalez-Rez. Sussex Tech started 1-3 last year and looked like an absolute disaster. They ended up finishing as one of the hotter teams in the state. They won 5 of their last 6 before, again, losing to Tower Hill 14-0 in the first round. They do return all-district wide receiver Jeremiah Handy and fullback Jaron Sample. They do a lot of running the football. This game is going to be interesting to see, given that Laurel blew them out last year, and this game is now at Sussex Tech. It's going to be at 7 p.m. Hopefully, you're going to get a raucous crowd down there for two teams down in there near that area. So I think Sussex Tech's going to make some strides. Again, they had a good season last year, qualified for the playoffs. I still think Laurel's a little bit too strong. They did lose some key players, but they also returned some very key players. So I look for this to be a much, much closer game than it was last year, but I still like Laurel to pull this out in the end.
Yeah, I like Laurel too. No matter who wins or loses this game, the winner's going to have a good shot to win their second game of the season. The loser's also going to have a good shot to win their second game of the season. So that's a good thing for both. Laurel will host Brandywine. Sussex Tech will host Delcastle. And of course, nothing against those schools. We give our opinions about who we think are going to win games against each other. So I would think both these teams are going to pick up wins in their second game of the season, which technically will be week 1. But I agree with you. I like Laurel in this one, but not. I think it will be closer than a lot of people think. All right, now we're going to move to Friday when DMA heads across town to Howard. Across town meaning about 5-mile ride probably to Abysinio Stadium. Nick Lincoln in his second year. Last year he led DMA to an 11-2 record. Howard 5-6 last year under head coach Dan Ritter, of course. They were a couple years off of a state championship. A lot of people balked when they were put in Class 2. Howard basically proved that that's exactly where they belong, at least for last year was in Class 2. We'll see about this year. These two teams played in week 6 last year, and DMA won 28-20. And Marty, if I remember right, I tried to look it up and couldn't find it. I don't think this game was as close as that. Didn't Howard rally late to catch up? Does that ring a bell?
They did. Actually, Howard led 8-7 at halftime of this game, and then DMA kind of went on a run in the second half. Howard came back to make it close at the end, but yeah, it was still only an 8-point difference, but it was kind of one of those weird games where you just never felt in the second half that Howard was going to pull this one out, and they kind of felt that way a couple times last year, including their playoff loss. Yeah, it's just one of those weird situations where they couldn't generate a lot of offense, and it just never felt like they were going to pull games out at the end, which is very rare. And what, Dan Ritter had said this throughout the preseason and all season last year when everybody screamed they should be in 3A. He said, look, we're not the same team. We lost a ton of kids, and he was proven right. I mean, they struggled. They went 5-5. They had to beat Mount Pleasant in the last game of the season just to qualify for the playoffs. So yeah, and I think this one's going to be interesting because there's going to be you've got some Howard players that are coming back. Quarterback RJ Matthews had a great game last year against DMA. I believe he threw for 3 touchdowns. I thought this was Howard's best effort of the season when I watched the game. I recall I wrote some notes about the game though, and looked them up today and found that I said this was their best effort of the season. I still think it was. DMA is tough. They still return quarterback BJ Aline, running back DeFair Watts. The game being at Howard and knowing Dan Ritter and his ability to get the most out of his kids, I think this is going to be a real good game. This may be the game of the weekend. I still like DMA to take it. They have more returning players with more experience, I should say, than the Howard returning players. So I think DMA takes this. I do think Howard is going to start to make their rebound where they become a serious contender at the Class 2 level. And who knows, 2-3 years, we're going to have this conversation where people are screaming for them to move up again. But for now, I do think DMA still gets a win here.
Do you think the fact that this is the first game of the season for both teams makes a huge difference for either of the teams versus game 6 when they're halfway through the season? You got a lot of game film you can watch. Some roster changes might have happened for one reason, for either for grades or players quitting or somebody coming onto the team they weren't expecting or injury. Do you think that plays a role in this game at all?
I actually don't think it does in this game. I think because they have experienced players coming back at some key positions again, both of them return their starting quarterbacks, some key starting offensive players. I think that the rhythm and the cohesiveness of the teams are going to be just as good as they were in game 6 last season in terms of relativity, both teams where they were in game 6 and now where they are in game 1. So I don't think that's going to play a big part. I do think for Howard, this is a huge, again, just like the last game we talked about, I think this is a big confidence moment for them. I think this is where some of the young kids are going to get a chance to step up. Hopefully they get a great turnout there. DMA fans, as we know, they do travel, so they're going to pack Howard Stadium, or pack the stadium, Abyssinia. So it'd be interesting to see if Howard can bring the same type of energy to this game, because I do think DMA feeds off their fans. As we know, we've seen the games and we've heard the stories. DMA fans are rabid, and I don't mean that in a bad way.
Right.
But Jeremy Jean, the AD up there, is one of those guys on social media who's getting kids fired up. He's doing it up at the school. I don't know a guy who loves his job more than he does.
He might have a cheerleading outfit on that night.
Oh my God, yeah. I mean, the guy's on the sideline. He's slapping 5 with the players and stuff. So there's a lot of excitement there. So I think if Howard's able to combat that, bring the fan base out, and get some of these young kids fired up and ready to go, this could be a lot closer game. Again, last year it wasn't a far difference. It was 8 points, but you just never felt that Howard was going to make that final push. So I do like DMA here, but as far as the first game goes, I don't think it matters. I think because the environment is going to be wired, I think both teams players in some key spots. I think it's going to be a very even matchup of the two teams, and we'll see what happens. But I do like DMA.
All right, we're going to disagree on this one. I'm going to go with Howard because I do think the difference of having a game 1 be this game make a difference versus 6. There's no tape that they're going to see of Howard, most likely, maybe some scrimmage where you only get to see a handful of stuff. Howard's known for its speed and its athleticism, and that's hard enough to stop if you know where the players are going. It's even harder when you don't. So I could see Dan Ritter having a couple plays, whether you call them trick plays or just plays that aren't common football plays, and getting the ball in the hands of his speedy wide receivers or in his in the hand of a quarterback, and just letting them be athletes. And then, if you can do that a few times, all of a sudden DMA's down by 14 and they're trying to catch up. And again, trying to catch up in the first game of the season, that counts. And that's tough to do as well, to go through that experience. It's one thing if you've experienced that 3 or 4 times and Howard goes up on you in week 6 and then you come back. Different here. So I'm going to go ahead and take Howard in this one to pull an upset, because I do think Vegas would have DMA as the favorite here. Both of these teams in week 1, their second games of the season, DMA is going to host Archbishop Curley. They didn't play them last year. They played another out-of-state team, so I don't know much about them. And Howard is going to travel to Concord for a Saturday 10:30 morning game. And as much as we always used to like those Saturday morning games, we always did one a year, Marty, because then you have the rest of the day to yourself. That's a little bit tougher for the football players who have to make sure they're in bed early on Friday night. So Concord might have the advantage there. We'll talk about that game next week. All right, speaking of Saturday, let's turn to Saturday of week 0 of the season. And there is only one game on Saturday, and that's Sussex Central at William Penn, 1:00 kickoff. Sussex Central coming off a 7-5 season. William Penn a 6-6 season. Head coach John Wells led the Golden Knights to the state championship a couple years ago. William Penn hasn't won the state championship since 2014, but Matt Sable seems to have them going in the right direction. Sussex Central will still not be in school this week. William Penn kids will be. So that's a little bit of a difference there. Sussex Central will have the opportunity to be in double sessions probably this week. Unless there's some teacher professional days toward the end of it, then Coach Wells will have to be part of that, obviously. William Penn will be one session only throughout this week. I'm not sure that matters at this point in the season. I think it used to be a bigger deal when nobody could start practice before August 15th. And William Penn always seemed to start school about 3 days after that. And it affected all of their fall sports because everybody was practicing double sessions for at least the first 7 or 8 days. And William Penn always seemed to get the bad luck there in terms of the schedule. Not so much this year. Marty, do you think that makes a huge difference in the outcome of this game? The fact that the Sussex Central kids are going to be undoubtedly practicing more. How much more we don't know leading up to that week.
I don't, only because as a Saturday game, they've gotten used to this schedule Monday through Friday now for a few weeks. Saturday, this is going to be like a normal visit up to William Penn. I mean, they know what time they take the buses. They've made this trip before. William Penn, boy, this is a tough one for them. William Penn, that their best player last season was Markel Holman, their running back. And of course, he transferred out of the school. I think we talked about this last week, went to CR for classes after football season. Then his family moved to the Smyrna School District, where he'll be playing for Smyrna this year. But that was a huge loss for them. Sussex Central won the matchup last year down in Sussex 20-0, which was the halftime score. And again, it was one of those games where it's just kind of a grinded out. Sussex Central, as we know, loves to run the football. They usually have big lines. They still do. They return 2 key running back, Shields, their fullback, and running back Andrew Long, defensive end Kevon Moore-Brittle, who had a great season for them last year. They have one of the better kickers in the state in Ibrahim Leva-Fajako. So I think this is going to be a tough one for William Penn. I like Sussex Central pretty big here. I do think Penn has the advantage of, obviously the afternoon start. From what I saw last year, there were some smaller crowds at William Penn that I think we've seen in the past.
And it's Labor Day weekend.
It is. It's going to be tough to draw the kids out there. Plus the fact that, again, Sussex Central did win this game in a shutout last season. They're always one of the stronger teams at the top of the state. So they just won the state title 2 years ago. So I think this one's going to be Sussex Central is going to have their way with William Penn. I do think William Penn is going to get better. I think the loss of Holman is huge. He was so much production for them. Now, again, he's been gone for a long time. So they've been working kids in the spot to try to get kids in a position to succeed. But I just think Sussex Central has way too much here.
Yeah, despite losing 21 seniors, Sussex Central does have a lot of experience. John Wells told us all year last year, told everybody all year, we're young. Basically, we're not going to be state champions. We're young, and we're going to be better next year. And all indications are they are better this year. They have a tough schedule. They do play Milford, one team down in Class 2. The rest of them are all Class 3 teams. They will host Sally's next week. So you could look at it like this. If you're Sussex Central, let's win this Penn game so we don't start out 0-2. Doesn't mean that they can't beat Sally's. They certainly can, but they're going to have a tough week 1 game, their second game of the season. William Penn's going to head to Penwood up in Pennsylvania for their second game, a team they beat 27-8 last year. So they have to be looking at it. Look, it's not the end of the world if we lose to Sussex Central. We have a good shot to win in week 2 and even things up. So,
and by the way, Penn, I mean, they could run into a situation where Sussex Central's looking ahead to Sally's.
Yeah, exactly.
Those two teams had a great game last season, and maybe Sussex Central, looked past the Penn team that had lost their best offensive weapon, did not have a great season. So you never know. And I just wanted to point out one thing, because you said it was the only Saturday game, just for people listening. We're only doing the Delaware versus Delaware games. So Middletown, of course, everybody knows, I've seen a lot of chatter about their game against St. John's College. We'll talk about those games after they happen, but we won't beforehand, mostly because it's so difficult to get information on these out-of-state teams. Middletown will play St. John's College, but we're going to focus on the Delaware versus Delaware matchups.
And those other matchups that we're not going to talk about, Seaford, which finished 7-3 last year, they traveled to Colonel Richardson. Milford, which finished 3-6 last year, they go to Cambridge South Dorchester, a team they beat 34-14 last year. Dover is going to host Arundel. Dover finished at 7-5 last year. They lost to Arundel 28-27 in a really tight game. A lot of people thought Dover were kind of expecting that Dover would win to start their season down there in Dover. So those are the other 4 games that take place. Delaware playing teams from out of state. All right, Marty. So you got one game to go to of the 6 Delaware versus Delaware teams playing each other. Which one are you going to?
The one I'm going to is DMA Howard. I just think there's going to be a great atmosphere there. I do think DMA is going to rock the house there, but I'm really curious. I think that the reason I wanted to go more than anything was to see what Dan Ritter and his kids do. And to your point, he's been around a long time. He's a cagey guy. He's going to get the most out of his young guys, and they are a fast team. That's one thing we did see during the season last year. In fact, if you look at these 2 teams on tape, they're 2 of the faster teams in the state. I mean, BJ Aline and DeFair Watts can run with anyone, but then you got RJ Matthews and the kids down there at Howard that can do the same thing. So I think this could turn into a track meet, some standards, and it just seems like it's going to be a fun game to watch. And again, a Friday night game at 7 p.m. Or excuse me, is this a Thursday night game? I believe yes, this Thursday night game at 7 p.m. Yep. So no, I was wrong. It is a Friday night game. I apologize. I got that wrong again. William Penn is not September 3rd and DMA is September 2nd. So yeah, this is going to be, it's going to be a rocking atmosphere at Abyssinia. And so DMA Howard for me is potentially the game of the weekend.
And just to clarify, I said 6 Delaware versus Delaware games. There's actually only going to be 5 played. We're not sure what happened to we know what happened to the St. Mark's AI game, but we're not sure if that's going to be a JV game or what that's going to be. So there's only 5 Delaware teams playing Delaware teams in this week 0. If I could go to any game, it's going to be the game that I'm actually going to go to. And that's Caesar Rodney at Hodson, because it's about 3 miles from my house. And I will go and watch them play at 4:00. I'm excited to see. And you asked Marty why it was a 4:00 game. I'm also thinking, I bet there's going to be an opportunity for students just to stay after school and go to the game, which normally a home Hodson game's at Saturday morning. So kids have to, they get a good crowd, but there's probably a lot
That's
of
a great point.
who don't show up because they can't get rides to the game. They don't drive and they can't get rides. So my guess that 4:00 game was made for a couple of reasons. One, it's got to be done before dark. As I mentioned, there's no lights there, but also because it gives the students a chance just to stay at school. Now I could be wrong. They could force every kid to get on the buses and go home. I'm not sure what exactly the bell schedule is, but I would expect to see more than normal more than normal amount of students at those games. It's also Frank Moffitt Jr.'s last home opener. It's also the last home opener in that stadium before they refurbish that entire complex. So I'm heading to the CR Hodson game for all those reasons, but I also think it's one of those games that's going to tell a lot about both of those teams. I would
agree.
I would be excited for both teams if it's a well-played game that stays close throughout the game, meaning both teams play 4 quarters, both teams look good, and even though both teams may not be contending for a state championship this year, it would give both teams hope that, hey, our young guys, because both teams are young, our young guys are going to be able to compete in the next couple of years for a state championship. So that's what I would go with there. All right. Don't forget AndreLphotography.com if you want pictures of your team, portraits of your child, or game action shots of your child. And he doesn't just do football. This is a football show, but he doesn't just do football. He does all sports. You won't be disappointed. Visit AndreLphotography.com to learn more about Andre Smith and see on the website what he can actually do. All right, before we do our shout outs, Marty, to end things, we're going to talk again about our rebrand that's going to take place next week. When this podcast lands on your phone or your device that you use and you get it at, you'll see a new image and you'll see a new name. We are going to become the Delaware High School Football Podcast, because all we're going to do is football for 20 weeks, a few weeks leading up, a few weeks during the playoffs, tap it off at the end after the state championship game, that final Sunday of the weekend. And so it's an exciting time for us to be able to make this rebranding. Just as the season officially kicks off with week 0 this week, we will kick off the Delaware High School Football Podcast, and we are excited for that. Marty, got any shout outs this week?
I do. I have one. I had a communication on Twitter yesterday with a woman named Amy Hoff, and I know you know her or okay. And she does some designs for the Appo football team, the social media account, I guess, and she posted one of the game day designs yesterday, which is just phenomenal. And if you go look her up, Amy Hoff on Twitter, I don't have her Twitter handle here, but I think you can find it by her name if I recall. She works for the Appo School District, but just a phenomenal talent for this. I was looking through, and the one yesterday just kind of blew me away. And then people will see it when they see the design for this. But, social media, and I talked to a couple of people about this on Twitter yesterday as well. Social media is becoming such a huge tool for these programs to get the word out, to build up excitement, because the kids, that's where they're getting their messages these days, the students. And some of the schools, and Appo is one of them, has a tremendous social media system. Tatnall has the same, I believe. There's some other schools that do a really nice job. St. Mark's, the On the Hill Twitter account. But it's so nice to see the community getting involved. And when I saw Amy Hoff's work, I was just kind of blown away by that. And I just, I said, I kind of retweeted it and just said, whoever did this is awesome. And she said, well, that'd be me. So thank you. Which was great. So I just think I love to see the excitement this stuff generates. And for me, I love that kind of stuff, the game day stuff. Benny Mitchell for 302 Sports does some great pregame stuff that he puts on Twitter. Design work for the games. So I just love to see this stuff. So my shout out to Amy Hoff for Appo for her social media post yesterday about the game day experience at Appo.
And ironically, Marty, I asked you who your shout outs to, and you told me her. And my shout out was going to be to her son, because her son caught his, he's a wide receiver for Appoquinimink High School, just a sophomore, caught his first touchdown pass. Granted, it was a scrimmage, so I guess it technically in statistics won't count as the first real football touchdown for this kid. But it was a great pass from Jacob Yard, the freshman quarterback for Appo. It looks like he's probably going to be the starter. And he made the connection with Noah Hoff. And there's some other varsity wide receivers, and I'm assuming Noah's going to play varsity, but it was a great catch. I was happy for him. And Marty, he's one of these kids, and I've gotten to see a lot of his game film because of his mother is a friend of ours, and she sends it to me because she knows I like to see it. And, it's one thing to have good technique during the passing drills at practice, which I have seen him do since he was a little kid playing flag football. And I've seen video of him doing passing drills where, the technique's perfect. You go down, you go out, you put your hands up over your shoulder, you watch the ball into your hands, and then you tuck it. It's another thing when you see it happen in the games. And this touchdown pass that he caught was deep. It was a full sprint, caught it, tapped his foot, and scored. And it was just, you couldn't have made a better pass and a better catch. And so obviously I was excited for Noah. He's also a friend of my son's, in full disclosure. And it's exciting to see a freshman quarterback throw a perfect pass like that. They ran a perfect play and scored against Sussex Central. And, Sussex Central is going to be one of the top 4 teams, we think, in that class. And so, and I don't know who was in the game in terms of first team, second team, but it doesn't matter. That's a perfect pass and a perfect catch and perfect technique on the catch. He basically tapped his foot in and then went out of bounds. And it's one of those that probably, if there was instant replay, not probably, if there was instant replay in high school scrimmages or high school at all in Delaware, that would have been reviewed. It would have been a catch. I slowed it down and watched it. Would have been a catch, but it would have been reviewed. That's how great of a catch it was. And it was the technique that made it that way. So congratulations to Noah Hoff. Hey, it's your first touchdown. You'll never forget that. You'll never forget the first one that happens in a real game, but you'll never forget that one either.
And you know what? We'll find that and retweet it out of our Delaware Sports Debate account, the Twitter account, which we're going to be changing. But we'll put that out there today too, because it was a phenomenal the throw and catch. And you're right, it is a dead sprint to the end zone. Just perfect catch, perfect throw. Yep. So we'll put that out on our social media account today.
Yeah, she sent me that video right before you sent me the conversation you had with her on Twitter, and that's why I was able to send you the video. So it was pretty cool how that worked out. And Marty mentioned our new Twitter. Our handle will be DELHS Football. So it's easy to remember, because if you follow high school sports, if you're listening to this show, you probably also follow hashtag DELHS for all your Delaware high school sports, no matter the sport. So we decided to create a recognizable handle to be easy to remember. We don't expect to take over the DELH hashtag. We're never going to do that. We don't want to do that. Continue to follow the hashtag DELHS. But our Twitter handle, so you know how to easily find it, is DELHS Football, and we'll continue to monitor both accounts throughout most of this season as we do that. All right, I got one more shout out. Head coach Kerry Galloway reached out to us, a head coach at Del Castle. Kind of funny. He said, me and my wife listened to your show on our way home from church, and we really enjoyed that. So we appreciate that. But He wanted to let us know about a couple newcomers that have come in since preseason started. He's very excited about them. Junior Angel Donato. If it's Angel, I apologize, but it's Angel, Angel or Angel Donato. He's an offensive lineman. And freshman Amir Bambata, who plays just about everywhere, fullback, middle linebacker, and defensive end. Del Castle is very excited about those players and very excited about their season. Again, they are one of the benefactors of this new class system. They're playing against teams they have legitimate shot to beat. So thank you, Coach Galloway, for reaching out to us, and to you and your wife for listening on the way home for church.
Thank
Marty,
you.
that's going to do it for us. I think you got anything else you want to throw in here before?
No, I think that's it for us. I'm excited about the rebrand to start next week, and we finally got we'll have some final football games to talk about and review. So I'm psyched about next week's podcast already.
Kickoff of the 2022 season, along with the kickoff of the Delaware High School Football Podcast, is next week. Enjoy it. Have a great sports week, everybody.